What's up, guys? Welcome back to Wrenching Wrecked. So many happenings. Tractor, we got the pump apart. Wanted to combo a couple of those last videos because I was working on this XLCH chopper while also working on this. It didn't make sense logically, because if anybody's trying to put one of these springers on and trying to find the right stem nut or whatever else, most of the reason I do this is stuff that I can't necessarily find the right information right away. And on the bike stuff, I like just kind of filming what it is, and I try and keep these a little bit less cut and trimmed. I don't like doing the full how-tos, but I ran into issues on this stem nut, and that's why I have 3 or 4 of the ones sitting over on the bench right there, trying to find the right size. I thought it was a 1-incher. I think this is actually a little bit bigger. As far as I'm aware, you get into custom things and you have custom problems, I guess. On the big twin stuff, it was always kind of sportster neck, sportster front end, shorter neck height-wise, but I always thought it was a 7/8 versus a 1-inch thread. I'm not an expert, I don't know, it's just issues that I've had. I always thought the big twins typically tended to run the bigger neck, or the late model sporties run the bigger neck. Enlighten me if you know better. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that do. So that was a pain in the ass, but we got this finally set up. I mean, nothing on this is completely done and dialed. I will say, I mentioned the dust caps for the bearings on this. Those are the parts that I said I needed to machine down. It was these aluminum ribbed dust caps. They're pretty thick, but on this setup, I think that will end up working in the final assembly. It is all on, so this is the neck bearing race, the chrome plated, or I don't know what that is. Is it stainless or chrome? Whatever that is, machined, nice little piece with tapered style bearings, non-ball tapered bearings. But that's in, dust cap is on. The dust cap is the thicker piece. So a stock one, do I have anything close laying around? On the shovelhead, for instance, this is just a stamped steel type plate underneath here. I know it's not the best lighting, and I apologize, but that's typically what gets run. There's actually not one on this. Interesting. But typically, stamped steel plate goes down the neck, then your bearing slides over the neck stem, drops down, but that's kind of where we're at on this one. None of these are tight. I don't have risers installed. The top clamp's got to come off to put those back. Well, I might have a little bit of room here, but tightening these down, might be able to get to them from here, but this is going to come off one more time for a final assembly. I lied when I said front end goes on, but it's not a final. I also hate, in mock-up stages, I hate greasing everything knowing that it might have to all come out again or come apart again. Why get dirty and have dirty, greasy bearings on there if I don't need to at this point? So that is the end of that one for this. We're moving on to the tractor for now. The second part of the last video that I thought was going to be a 1-part, but not. We pulled the hydraulic pump off of this, so I got all the bolts just kind of sitting in here again. It's got 2 bolts up front, 3 bolts on the bottom. Relatively simple to get all this apart, and then the tack drive cable, which goes up to the tack, which actually kind of works. I don't know, there's a lot going on this tack. Whatever people invented and calculated out, PTO RPM, per gear, per total RPM, per whatever. However they did that, it's mathematic magic to me. I know it's ratios and everything changes based on, I understand it, but props to you to put that all on one gauge. So ideally, the plan right now, I'm gonna get that pump on the back of the bench over there. I moved it. I don't really have the best of workbenches up here. We made these nice wood ones, but I feel bad disassembling a really dirty, oily pump on the wood benches. So in a minute, I'm going to grab some tools, start breaking this down, and we're basically gonna rebuild this entire pump. Well, it's been a couple days, I'm not gonna lie. I pulled that pump off, I set it over here, and had every intention of going through it. Now it's living in a battery tender box, because I brought this back to the house to try and rip this thing apart at the house garage. Also, ran out of time. Too many other things going on with the holidays and work and things, shipping stuff. I got one post of a bunch of old Harley stuff on the Facebook Marketplace, but probably been up for like a year. And I had a customer, not a customer, but I had somebody message me on a set of RevTech flywheels that I got that are in pretty good shape. So kind of dropped everything the last 2 days. One, I had to go dig them out from upstairs at the other shop. Two, cleaned them up, got a bunch of pictures, and then had to make a custom box to ship flywheels, which is really, really awkward. Luckily, I had the bottom half of the box, old set of RevTechs from Custom Chrome. But got those all done, boxed up, and sent. So those are on their merry way to Michigan. Good luck with that rebuild if you stumble across this page, but grab some tools. I need a 1-inch wrench for this on the Speedo drive, and then we got a bunch of Speedo things to pull off. This is the gasket and the seal that's leaking on this side. I don't know if I need to disassemble the whole pump, but we also have a kit. Where did I just put that? Oh, right here. We have a whole rebuild kit for all of it, so I think we're just gonna blast the whole thing apart and go from there, and then try and fix anything I mess up. Live and learn. Never done tractor things, so this should be fun. We have a 1-inch drive on the tack. Maybe I should open up that kit first, but 1-inch drive. This is pretty much exactly like what's wrong on the tack drive on the ironhead. But we'll yank this out. Then I believe we need to grab a flathead on all of these parts. So that's the drive gear. Just goes into the shaft, and it's got little oil passages for lubrication purposes. And then we got a big flathead in here. See how lucky we get. Not good at filming things like this sometimes. See, that sounds okay to me. But in order to break this free, I don't have an impact up here, nor do I have, here's the issue, here's the gear. This needs to pop free so I can get this shaft out. The pump itself sounds okay, but we're spinning that gear. So maybe I can jam something in here. Try and lock that out while we pop this pump off. An impact would work really well here too. Come on. Yep, that worked. Just put it in between the gear, pop that free. Not nearly as tight as I expected that to be. And we're gonna flip it upside down. Okay, so the tack drive, we have bolt washer, which is slotted to run into the shaft that we just popped out of the Speedo drive. So all of this kind of goes together like that. Now, we should be able to pop this housing off. I am learning with you on this one 100% of the way. So we're gonna try our best here, but there are zero promises that I'm doing any of this the right way. .9/16 bolts all the way around here. Put the washers right back on, kind of breaking the paint. Won't be able to get to all of these with a impact, so let's grab a 9/16. That one's too big. Definitely a little on the crude side of doing this, but broke that one free. And unfortunately, open end just to break it free. Ooh, it's already pushing off. I didn't think that that was going to be under pressure, but it is. Thought that was going to glue itself to itself. Apparently it's not. So we definitely still have a good amount of hydraulic pressure built up in this pump. As we dive through this, every turn of this is pushing this entire cylinder off. But it is what it is. Little oil built up behind the seals because those are actually functioning and working like they're supposed to. And unfortunately, this was all repainted together and now all the paint's off. So we're gonna have some ugly bolts exposed on the tractor, but that's okay. Man, would have been nice if this was in the barn all day. It's very cold parts. Okay. Now I want to be very careful here, just because I don't really know what I'm getting into. Got some fluid. Looks like we had a bearing. Kind of a goofy design. Definitely a goofy design. What do I have? One, I need a rag. Two, I need something to kind of soak up some of this oil. What do I got here? Not the best, but it'll work. So we separated that. O-ring seal here, oil, pistons. Let this drain, make a big old mess. Let me grab some rags and towels, clean up this oil, and then we'll dig into each side of this. Again, this side was not the leaky side. It's this side that I need to get to, but I'm pretty sure all of the parts I need are in here. Grabbed a rag, cleaned up the bench a little bit because there's hydraulic fluid pouring everywhere. We got the housing separated. Gear, this is just floating. In theory, it should just float on this shaft as far as I'm aware. Very weird to me. Harley things, old car things where everything's supposed to be tried and true and rotating straight. Typically, transmission leak on a shovelhead. It's because the shaft's wobbled out, or, I mean, there's a million reasons for that, but I want tight bushings, not tight, but tight enough where they're not extremely loose and wobbling around like crazy. Get into tractors. It's the exact opposite. Sorry, I keep hitting the tripod and everything because there's so much stuff up here. It's a wobble shaft. Look at this. That's crazy. I don't know. Maybe if you're into tractors, this is normal, but to me, that's entirely odd. But that's how it works. So we got to get this shaft out of here. So what we're going to do is these should come off. So we got a thrust plate and a bearing, which all look very, very clean. So we have our thrust bearing, thrust plate. Yeah, extremely clean. So that's good. This will go here, kind of in between. And then we have our collar here on this shaft. I'm not replacing or rebuilding those, but we took off this little gear drive bolt already, which went through here. So that's wide open and ready to come apart. So I'm gonna throw a punch or a socket in there, socket extension rather. And we're gonna try and pound that out. And I think if we drive this into here, do I have punches up here? Let me see if I can dig out a punch and an actual hammer instead of sitting here beating this with other wrenches. Didn't find a punch, but I found a screwdriver. And I found it's too small. I need a bigger screwdriver. Found a screwdriver, another one. and a semi-okay hammer. Let's see what happens here. This could work, this might not work. I could just send parts flying across the bench. Don't really know. Let's put a forearm on there. Are you moving at all? Again, this is not the side that I was concerned about in terms of, oh, it is moving. We're halfway through that gear now on the outside. Little bit of separation on the shafts over here. Oh, no, not the shaft. It's just driving this bearing out, this outer bearing. Trying to do multiple things at once. I'm looking at the camera to see what's getting filmed and the rest of this, but there we go. Ooh, big old bearing. So we got a big bearing here. We're gonna press that one right back in. I think, as long as this all feels good. Ah, that's kind of goofy. So we got a flat end, just pulled this out. Again, I'm just gonna relate everything to Harley stuff, but kind of like the gear that goes behind the Bendix on a starter for a shovelhead. Gear comes out, this flat end goes towards the housing, recessed end sticks out. So this will sit on here just like this, like that. That's how that will get reassembled in here. And then obviously the bearing's gonna come through here. I know that I probably have a new seal in this kit. I don't know if I'm gonna replace this side of the seal yet. Mating surface, there's a little bit of a ridge built up here, but it doesn't seem too bad. But we'll file that down. I don't know if that's silicone or if that's a ridge. We'll smooth all this out, clean all that up. Definitely a paint ridge. But now we have a raw cast piece that we could blast and coat and clean up if need be. Not gonna be doing that yet. We're not doing a full restoration on this tractor or anything like that. And it's an O-ring that goes on here. So the mating surface on this side is just an O-ring. In my experience, O-rings are usually pretty forgiving. So we're gonna set that there. Maybe I'll put these bearings back on here too. Just like that. Uh-oh. Come on. Come on, you. Like that. And then we'll dive into this body. Let me wipe this bench down one more time. Put this over, drain some more of the hydraulic fluid that's building up in here, because these are our little pistons. It should be a piston and a spring behind here. Yeah. Clean that one up next. Look at that oil. Milky. Just set it right back in, but all of that's gonna come apart next. And I'm filthy again. I took this whole side apart. This is all extremely clean. So I honestly think I'm just gonna reassemble all of this. I'm gonna press this bearing and the gear back in. The seal's in really good shape. I know this was bone dry on the pump itself when this was mated to the other side. I've never taken one of these apart, so I didn't know if the leak would run all the way through, but I'm fairly confident all of my issues on this seal leaking here are on this side, but I didn't know how all of this goes together. So now I've taken it apart, I've kind of looked at everything. I'm pretty confident on this seal and this gasket surface and this flange mating surface. I think these are okay. So I'm gonna clean all these up. I'm gonna drive this shaft back in, and I'm gonna reassemble all of these bits, minus the bolts that go into the other housing. I could be wrong. If the parts are here and it's something I gotta take off again, I'll do it, but I looked this over pretty good when it was running and pouring oil. Everything I saw was on the other side. I thought the whole thing had to kind of come apart as a unit. Live and learn. I'm not opposed to taking this apart and realizing that this bearing feels really good. This shaft and keyway feel really good. Everything else I think should be okay. So I'll film it, but I don't know if it's gonna make the cut for the video. I might just kind of shorten that and expedite it. Or I'll do a time lapse and play some music while we slap this back together. I'm gonna reassemble all of this because it's 4 bolts to put this back on here. 4 bolts and an O-ring. Maybe I'll put a new O-ring in here just as peace of mind, if you will. I'll run this over the towel just to kind of clean it up and maybe take a file to some of these high paint edges before we put it back together, but yeah, this is going back together. I believe this is supposed to be a tapered like Timken style bearing with a race. This is a live bearing, not a live bearing, but like a much bigger ball bearing. So this needs to get recessed back in, and I have 2 options. I can either pound this shaft back out. Maybe that's actually a smarter idea. Let me turn you guys back down here. I don't know what I'm doing, but we have a wobble shaft going onto a bearing. This bearing, as far as what I researched, is supposed to be a Timken bearing with a race. This is a press fit shaft, offset, albeit, that doesn't really matter, but the bearing shaft goes through the bearing into the case. This goes here. This needs to be a press fit, based on my understanding and logic of how things kind of work, because that's how I took it apart. This needs to go back in here and then get pressed through. So, issues I'm having. This wobble shaft has a good amount of surface area where it almost encompasses the outer race of the bearing, which I don't really want to push on, and needs to also line up with this on the inside through this housing. So I'm not worried about the seal. We got plenty of oil and lube on there, but this needs to get pressed back in here, and I don't have anything big enough to press this back in, and it's a wobble shaft, so we don't have a straight shot to try and drive this back into the housing. So I'm gonna go over to the press, look around at some other stuff and see what I have here and try and make something work. And then I'll let you guys know what I figure out. Over to the vise. I did a little bit of experimenting before I start driving all these parts apart. So here's the big bearing that I was talking about. Here's the wobble shaft. Chucked this up in the vise because I didn't know, one, if the vise was gonna have enough meat to clear around it, but I gave this 3 love taps with a hammer, or flat face hammer. We're just kind of gently tapping this down and out. Do not use a waffle hammer or anything with texture on the end of this. Do not beat on them this way. Put a bolt in there. Put anything in there. Don't do what I just did. That is terrible, but that is how I got it out. It's not the right way to do it. And if you're not running a flat hammer trying to tap it directly flat, you could very easily waffle out the end of this shaft, and that turns into a whole bigger issue. I was gentle and used a very small, very light hammer in order to do that, but now that the shaft is out, I know that this will press back onto the bearing. I'm less worried about pressing it in than I am about getting things disassembled. So we're gonna take this bearing now and drive this right back into our housing. Gear doesn't, gear does not have to be on right now. So we're gonna wipe some oil and clean this up a little bit. Not gonna go completely dry because I do want a little bit of lubrication in here. But this bearing needs to go back in this housing. And I feel much better about pounding this bearing into the housing as a singular piece without the shaft on there. So let me see what I got, or what I can rig up in the press. We'll get this back in, then I have sockets that will go around the wobble shaft. Then we'll try and drive this back in. Gear needs to go in before we start doing that. and then we can put the thrust bearings back on the outside. I shouldn't have taken this whole thing apart. I should have just started on the other side. So we got the bearing kind of set up here. I'm just running this on the anvil side of the vise right now. I've been love tapping this gently with a very light hammer this entire time. Hopefully you guys heard that sound change. That bearing's seated. That's all it took. So that I'm calling good for now. Give that a quick wipe down. Oh yeah, spit shine. I'm using a wet towel because I don't have any actual shop rags up here. I just have these moist towelettes that clean up all of my grease and grime really well. So that is back in. Now we need to press this wobble shaft, which is going to be kind of interesting to do, but there's plenty of lube on there. That's got to go through the bearing, but I can't press it in until I get that gear back in. Gear needs to drop in here, like so. The chamfered edge faced out before, so we need to keep it that way, for one. But I don't want to do this until I give this at least a quick little wipe down. Not that dirty, but don't need a bunch of crap going into the hydraulic pump. Drop this back in here, kind of like a Harley starter gear. And then, this is the goofy part, because this isn't flat. I don't really have a way to pound this back in, unless we go through this point here. We have probably 1/8 inch or so before we run into spline issues. Keep it, but now I have enough of the shaft coming through that bearing where I think we can try and wrestle this gear on. Yeah. Getting into stuff that you don't really know about and you have no idea what you're doing. No wonder. Am I gonna piss off a bunch of vintage tractor people? Whoops. I'm sorry. I feel the shaft. We're engaged. Alright, couple more whacks on here, but I don't think this is the right way to be doing this. It's just goofy trying to... I'm hesitant to use a press on something that doesn't sit flat. So we're just doing quick little love taps. But the gear's back on. It's not rubbing. I think we're okay. So let's go back to the other side. It is sitting flush with the bearing race. The bearing already bottomed itself out. I heard the sound change. I think we're in pretty okay shape. So, I don't know. Tractor things, it seems okay. Slide our thrust bearing on. Get our spacer back on. Everything seems to spin proper and good. Awkward and weird, but it's working. So I'm calling this side good. Technically I can throw this little screw back in here. Yeah, maybe we'll do that. Let me just reassemble this whole side. So I'll grab my flathead and our drive screw. That kind of bottoms out in here. Get this tight until it starts spinning the gear again. I will say for tight, it was not like, oh wow, you're gonna break things or start pounding on things tight. It was just screw tight. So we'll go right back to that setting. Good there. So this side is kind of reassembled, and then the only thing we got left is our drive, which I think should probably drop in there before we slide the shaft in. This engages on the gear, as long as we can get that going, kind of like that. And then I'm gonna leave this one loose because I think I might have a new gasket for this as well. So I don't want to tighten that one down, but the rest of this will eventually get snugged back up into the piston side of the pump. So let's move on to here after I clean up again. The main reason I'm jamming on this right now, I wanted to do it a couple days ago. One, I want the thing working and functioning and be able to play with it a little bit more. Two, I have the dually sitting right outside of that door with a bunch of steel parts that need to get blasted. It's not really that much fun trying to roll this thing in and out, and I don't want to run it with that pump off. I know I started it up the other day real quick, but I don't want to run it with that pump off. So I got to get that done, and then I need the hydraulics kind of working to pull the sickle bar so I can put a hitch lift on there as well. Pop this cover off. Don't know what goes where or how any of these things actually go together, but I see bolts on the outside, so we're going to start there. Got what, 6 of them? When in doubt, just start taking things apart. And then came right off. Okay. We'll leave the bolts in. Nah, redundant. We're not leaving the bolts in. Leaving the bolts in is a good idea if you're not going to flip it over and drop them everywhere. So bolts are out. We have a weird plate, center screw, bunch of springs, steel plate, and a broken gasket that needs to come off. And then a lot of balls and bearings and things. This is the part that made me nervous because there's a lot of components to this that I don't necessarily understand. So, why were you leaking so badly? Is also one of the questions I want to ask. I don't know if one of these springs or something got stuck, because it doesn't look really like there's any sort of gasket other than this paper one, which just ripped apart. Well, where do I start here? We've got springs that are kind of stuck. Those just kind of go on the nubs of the plate. It looks like there's little roll pins in here. I guess we'll take the screw out. Dig deeper. Maybe. All right. Yeah, it's moving. Counts for something. So I'll get this screw out of here. It wasn't crazy Hercules tight or anything. It's just a flathead after all. But we'll pull that, set that there, and looks like the plate kind of wants to get up out of here. Oh, we lost a couple balls. Set these back where they were, based on the orientation of this. There's a little gap in the gasket right there. And then we have little tiny springs that go on that hydraulic plate. Almost lost one. Looks like those go over the little roll pins that are on that plate. So we're going to set that right there as well. Now, I put all these back, but I don't know why. Looks like there's a gasket here. It's also going to need to come off, so let's lay these out on here backwards so I can keep track. Both of these gaskets I'm definitely going to replace because I know I had a leak. I don't know what the cause of the leak was yet. Peeled up a little bit there, but for the most part, come on, one clean shot. That to me is a victory. We got pretty much the whole gasket. We got a little bit of residue right here. And we got a bunch of little tiny springs in here as well still. Let's see if these flip out. There's 6 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh. I wish we had smell-o-vision, because these smell fantastic. Whew, let me tell you. Not too bad. Pump is completely disassembled. I don't think, because everything in here actually looks pretty good at first glance. I'm not going to bust out a million micrometers and try and measure every single component. But I think everything in here does. Genuinely, like, I don't see anything. If it doesn't catch my attention, I feel like it's in pretty good shape. I think this is going to be okay. I think it's just going to be kind of a quick little rebuild on this. So you got all the big springs out from this side. So this can go up here now. I don't know if I'm going to do all that much more in terms of trying to get this ready for reassembly. I think this might just kind of get dropped back together. We'll go through the kit. What do we got in here? I got balls, I got little plastic bits. I don't know what those are for. But these are the big springs to drop back in here. Balls. I don't know if I'm going to use those. I don't know if I'm going to use the springs, to be completely honest. Might keep all of those. The gasket will definitely be getting replaced here. What does that one look like? It's got a big hole in the center. So that's this guy. This guy will be getting, ooh, way different. Gasket. Look at how thick this is. There's like a metal lining in there. So we're definitely going to be using this gasket. I think that's sat like that-ish. Just looking at the little groove. There's one little notch on this gasket. Yeah, just like that. So that goes that way. And then over here on the pump, we're gonna have to clean this one and scrape this one for sure. Oh God, what did I just do? Oh, the pistons. We saw those on this side. And now I'm losing the balls. So we have piston spring, freaked me out. Lots of parts that I don't understand what they do or how they work. Everything's covered in oil. But then we have more balls on the back side. So, what do I do with these guys? 4. Come on. Let go. All right, so I gotta get these two out. Let me grab a magnet or something if I have one up here. Try and get these two out. But we'll leave these over here. So we have pistons, plungers, and balls that we need to somehow get out of here. Maybe. Wipe the hands off, grab the pick. Just gonna kind of reach underneath here. Everything's covered in hydraulic fluid, so it doesn't surprise me that a lot of these little balls are sticking, but that should be everything out of here. This doesn't seem like a very complicated system by any means. I don't know exactly how it works yet. I know that fluid runs through here because everything's covered in oil, obviously, but it's like a diaphragm type deal. Bunch of springs, bunch of balls. Oil, I assume, flows through these gaskets that are, you know, junk. But I think that might be about it. We got an O-ring over here that I lost that goes here. But it's O-rings and rough gasket seals. So let me try and peel up this gasket here as gently as possible. I got the outers of this one off, but the inside of this is not in the best of shape, and I don't have any fresh razors up here. So I think that's where I'm gonna wrap this one up for right now. Tomorrow morning, I will come back up here, scrape this gasket area clean, get all of this stuff cleaned up as well. But I think pistons came up this way. So O-ring on this side. I'm not worried about the O-rings leaking all that much. I do have a new O-ring. I don't know if you guys can see that on camera, but we got a new O-ring there. I'm not rebuilding the top side of the pump. I should have started where my gut told me, just take off the broken bits and figure out what's wrong. Instead, I dove deeper, but been doing this for, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes. And we pretty much got the whole pump completely disassembled, minus cleanup time and bench time and things like that. But like, not that much time spent to get all the way down to the bare housings of all of these bits. Lots of O-rings, lots of seals, lots of oil, grease. If these were not already painted, I would probably blast and coat them and then put it all back together. But I don't care that much, not yet. That's something I can do way future me problem, I guess. But for now, I'm gonna leave all of these bits kind of on the bench, just like this. Tomorrow morning, I'll come back up here with a fresh razor blade, scrape all of this, get these cleaned up, get these gasket surfaces cleaned up. I know the hydraulics were working on this setup, so I'm not planning on doing a crazy full hardcore replace everything at this juncture. I just needed to stop leaking oil. And if this is the side that was leaking, right here, we have this gasket and we have this broken gasket. There's two gaskets, as far as I'm aware, and the shell itself has a little flange, so that should kind of seal. If the paper gaskets seal, we should be in good shape. So maybe one of those hydraulic balls was stuck and it kind of popped that cap off a little bit, is what my gut's telling me. We'll find out. And if I put it all back together and it leaks like crazy, then we'll start from scratch and start replacing springs and pistons and all of these. Nothing that I've taken apart on this looks to have any blatantly obvious signs of wear and tear or breakage. So we're gonna run with it. Part 1 of the pump. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.